I'm Laura Chandler, and this is the first in a series I'm calling Remembering Robert Thurman. We lost a giant when we lost Bob on June 16th, 2026. He was a giant in so many ways, a giant intellect, a giant heart, and a giant presence in the world. Bob was the Khapa Professor Emeritus of Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Studies at Columbia University, a lifelong supporter of Tibetan culture and the Tibetan people, and a close friend of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Many people knew him as Uma Thurman's father, but he was also recognized as one of the world's leading Buddhist scholars and was named by Time magazine as one of the 25 most influential people in America. To us, he was also a dear, longtime friend, advisor, and steadfast supporter of the sacred stream. Bob's passing was sudden and unexpected. Isa and I were on the East Coast at the time, preparing to give a talk at Tibet House, the organization Bob co-founded with Richard Gere to help preserve and share Tibetan culture. We were also at Minla Retreat Center, Bob's beloved retreat center in the Catskills, where Isa had just completed teaching a retreat and was scheduled to co-teach a course with Bob called The Wisdom Path. When the news arrived, it was heartbreaking, yet both our talk at Tibet House and Isa's program at Minla went on as scheduled. We thought this was what Bob would have wanted. Aside from prayer ceremonies held in Bob's honor, these were among the first public events to take place at either venue following his death. We are still processing the loss and the significance of being there at such a pivotal moment. What remains clear is my deep gratitude for Bob, for his friendship, and for the extraordinary legacy he leaves behind. The sacred stream has been blessed by many of the talks, teachings, and conversations Bob shared with our community, both at the Sacred Stream Center and through the Sacred Stream radio podcast. In this series, I will revisit and share some of those teachings as a way of honoring Bob and contributing in a small way to preserving his memory and the wisdom he offered so generously to the world. The first episode in the series is one of my favorite podcast conversations with Bob because it captures so much of what made him so extraordinary. At the time, we were hosting a series of events with him during the West Coast tour for his graphic novel, Dalai Lama, Man of Peace. Looking for an opportunity to fit in an interview about the book, I grabbed my portable microphone and recorded while Isa drove us to Google, where Bob was scheduled to give a talk. The result is a wonderfully candid and lively exchange that has all the qualities I loved most about Bob: his quick wit, his remarkable brilliance, his gift for storytelling, and above all, his deep and abiding love for the Dalai Lama. Listening to it now, I hear the warmth, humor, and wisdom that touched so many lives. As a footnote, two other extraordinary people helped bring this episode to life. The original music was composed by multi-instrumentalist and composer Dan Walters, who coincidentally shared a birthday with Bob. The episode was engineered by Jesse Osborne, a giant in his own right. Jesse began his musical career touring with Sly and the Family Stone as a member of Oz and the Sterlings. He later co-founded Mayob Records, the first Black-owned record company in Oakland, and went on to become a lead engineer at the legendary Fantasy Studios, where he also headed the blues division. During his time there, he worked with many celebrated artists, including Journey, Taj Mahal, and Joe Walsh of the Eagles. Jesse later joined the sound design teams at the Saul Zaentz Company, contributing to acclaimed films such as Amadeus and Caddyshack. Jesse was a dear friend, mentor, and advisor to me and to the Sacred Stream until his passing in 2019. He generously volunteered his time to run sound for countless Sacred Stream events, including many events with Bob. I am deeply grateful to have these memories and to be able to share this conversation and the artistry and spirit that Dan and Jesse contributed with you. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. There we go.
Okay.
This will be what it will be.
Okay.
So welcome to the Sacred Stream Radio podcast. In the car, we'll do some karaoke later. Car karaoke. Just kidding. Have you seen that, Bob? The car karaoke?
Car karaoke?
Yeah, it's a big It's a phenomenon.
It is? Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, some
I
guy
didn't know that.
makes all these famous people sing.
Oh, good. Oh, I'll have to carry my Zoom around in the car. I have a very good Zoom, actually, a very cool one.
Oh, good.
Uh-huh.
Good. Well, I just want to, you're on your book tour for
Yes.
your book about His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
The book is The Man of Peace.
Yes.
Man of Peace.
Man of
And-
Peace, the illustrated life story of the Dalai Lama of Tibet.
Yes. And how is the tour going for you? How is the book?
Well, it's it's a self-created tour because Tibet House US, a non-profit cultural center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we allowed to say officially in the US, is a publisher, and we have a distributor, which is Hay House International, but since they're only the distributor, we have to do all the publicity. So I've been doing and I have other jobs, so I've been doing little tiny book tours here and there.
Yes.
But it took time, and it was thanks to Sacred Stream and Isa and Laura of Sacred Stream that we got organized a great series of things here in California, in San Francisco, and I'm really having a lovely time with it because basically I love San Francisco, and California people are kind of more open in the easy in their sort of receptivity and more hearty in their laughter, I think, quite a bit than East Coasters, because they're not so stressed out in some ways, I think, maybe by the weather or by whatever it is. And so I've been enjoying it a lot, And of course, it's happening, which was unknown to us around the time we finished it. It's happening on the watch of the Washington, D.C. nightmare circus of the crazy clown, as the great Matt Taibbi calls the unnamed one, Lord Voldemort,
Right.
and the one who shall not be named. And so it's just a joy to be here with you all. And it's fun to be in the car. We're driving down to Google to give a talk. And that's the last event of the book tour. Then I'm going to be going home.
Well, you're a great sport to do this with me in the car, so thank you. And the book is beautiful. It's just a stunning book. It's a very detailed book, and it's a graphic novel.
Uh-huh.
And so I have a lot of questions about that. Why a graphic novel?
Well, one of our first media things for the book, when it first came out, was the Woodstock Book Fair. And all the literary people were there. It's become quite an institution in Woodstock, which is the oldest art colony in the U.S., actually, that exists. And so someone said, well, why are you calling it a graphic novel? It's a graphic biography.
Yes.
And in a way, that's true, but we consider it a novel because the Dalai Lama doesn't have time, and B, for constant going over every event in his life, and can you remember, Your Holiness, exactly what you said to Nehru and exactly what he said to you? And in his own autobiographies, he only gives very little bit of these kind of conversations, but because we were doing this illustrated with people's expressions and faces, and slamming fists on tables and things, we had to kind of logically infer what the dialogue might have been in many places and things like that,
Yes.
So we kept, since I've known His Holiness for 53 years, and I was around when a lot of these things were happening. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty accurate actually. And His Holiness eventually, when he saw it, really liked it, and his staff really liked it in his office, who are much more fussy than him.
That's important.
And I was really relieved. I was a little worried about it, and also we wanted to give him a sense of deniability because we intended to show the Tibetan Holocaust, if you will, the genocidal aspect of the Chinese invasion, occupation, annexation, and continuing oppression of Tibet. And, communist attack on Buddhism and destroying 6,000 monasteries. And, we showed some of that. We also showed some Tibetan guerrillas behaving badly, fighting with each other, overdoing it when they, get the Chinese going, forgetting that they're supposed to be Buddhist and non-violent and being really bad. Yep. So violence gets people being bad, even they're trying to be good. They have a theory they should be good, but they can still be bad. So we didn't, make it like a thing just against the Chinese. And in fact, I personally, and I think there are little traces of that attitude in the book, feel that the Chinese are just, they're maybe not as bad as the U.S. with the Native Americans 100 years earlier.
Right.
They themselves sometimes will say, if they will discuss it with you, some more liberal Chinese, they'll say that, well, what about you guys and the Indians?
That's
are
right.
you going to give America back to the Indians?
That's right.
Or why should we give Tibet? Even when they admit that they took Tibet, the ones who will admit it, there are very few of those. But even those who do will say, well, are you going to give U.S. back to the Indians? And we say, well, we can't, and we are not able to, but we don't think that it's a great thing that we don't do it. We say we're very happy if we can give back a huge portion of the Adirondack forest, if we can give back the Black Hills, which we haven't, but we should, not just the little reservations on the edge. We have done a lot in the Northwest Pacific Indians, and the Canadians have done better than us, actually.
Yes, they have.
But they're Nunavut, and so there will be a movement because these things never are over. Genocides, it's a stupid thing to think you can sweep it under the rug or bury it or justify it because of bad things that happened in past history.
That's
you can't.
Right.
And so, I don't blame them, though, but we don't blame the Chinese in particular. In fact, Marxism and communism are Western imports for them. They had a more balanced social system, even with an emperor, but still, in the good times in Chinese dynasties, the emperors supported democracy in a way. They kept robber barons down, his idea, so it's like a strong executive, And bad times in the dynasty when they were corrupt and when they didn't know where the source of their strength was, which was the people, they were not good. But Confucianism is a wonderful management of people and of justice system, and it worked well, in various periods in Chinese history. So, but the Western thing of industrial militarism, industrial consumerism, anti-nature pollution things, which Chinese didn't do, that's sort of, they were taken over by this modern style, that has been so disastrous for the whole place, being so disastrous for the planet. And we don't blame them particularly, like ethnically, it's all the Chinese fault. They're just swept up in this thing, and they're the latest. Actually, they're doing colonialism and imperialism and economic mercantilism very effectively in regard to the Western powers.
It's true.
Which is freaking them out. And there is a faction in China, a stupid one, that thinks in very Western gangsterish way, the Shanghai, the triads, and this kind of thing, that they should try to conquer the world in the wake of the British Empire and what they think of as the American Empire. There is a faction like that, for sure. But that's not really a Chinese thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you look back in history, the Chinese had ships that were 10 times bigger than Columbus's ships. They definitely reached the Americas, there's no doubt. They went to Africa and brought back elephants and gazelles and whatever, giraffes. And then they didn't go and occupy and start genociding everybody, even though they have a loyal population.
Right.
And because they liked being at home, they imagined they were the center of the universe and people would just come and bring them tribute, But so they were, they had a national ego. But they were not actually as bad as the Westerners. And further, in relation to Tibet, for thousands of years they were Buddhist. And the Chinese emperors and even the foreign emperors who conquered China, like the Manchus or the Mongols, they supported and patronized Tibet because they liked the idea of peace. Within it, once they had their empire, they liked the idea of peace, in other words.
Yes.
So we're not. The Dalai Lama absolutely is not anti-Chinese, and those of us in the world who little bit understand him and know him and believe in him, we're not anti-Chinese at all. In fact, we're looking forward to the time when the Chinese and the Tibetans are best of friends.
Yes.
And when Dalai Lama will be an emissary, like the ultimate Satchmo Louis Armstrong, goodwill ambassador for, he doesn't play this trumpet, but he's certainly popular around the world, and he will be great goodwill ambassador for a friendly, great power China who wants to do trade and not conquest, in other words.
Yes.
And that's what we look forward to. So.
Yes. And.
But and the book. I'm sorry to come back. I'm sorry to ramble.
No.
I'm car rambling here.
listening to the Sacred Stream Radio podcast. And now back to our interview with Robert Thurman.
In regard to the book, therefore, on the other hand, we don't romanticize and infantilize the Chinese the way sinologists tend to do, and so-called China hands and China experts, by swallowing the nonsense that they are particularly sensitive to losing face more than anybody else. Losing face just means ego, accepting some ego fault and, having the bigness to cope with it, and live with it, and go on from there. They're not any worse than anybody else on that. Look at the current president of the United States. He can't take the tiniest iota of criticism without completely freaking out. And the Chinese are just as grown up as anybody else.
Yes.
So therefore, we had to show they did bad things in their invasion of Tibet. They are doing bad things there still. They're doing bad things in Uyghur, in Xinjiang. They're doing bad things to Mongolians, and they have another 52 minorities. And they don't, they swamped them. They are Chinese Han chauvinists, they call it themselves.
Oh, interesting.
And they are like that,
Yeah.
So, but they have in their constitution the idea of being pluralistic and not swamping minorities with the vast Chinese population, and etc. And, someday we expect them to more live up to that. The Dalai Lama expects them to do that.
Yes. And what was your impetus? What was for writing the book?
Well, the impetus is that for the illustrated graphic novel part, the comic book, basically, glorified comic book, which is what a graphic novel is, that was to appeal to younger people, and actually also older people who are very much in the era of the iPhone and the Facebook and the Android, and, they don't want to read long, laborious pieces of writing. The rare scholar who sits and can get through 600 pages of type without some relief, some other kind of stimulus. And so, and I'm very gratified that I've had some people who have read the Dalai Lama's autobiographies, or tried to, and said, well, I didn't quite finish, admitted on seeing this book they didn't quite finish, and they were not clear about what happened in that era and this period, especially since His Holiness escaped. The story of the fleeing the communists and the midnight escape from Lhasa and all that was in Kundun, and people kind of know that story, like Tintin in Tibet and the young Dalai Lama escapes Kundun.
Right.
But they don't really know the ins and outs of the whole politics of the U.S.-China policy, Brzezinski, Kissinger, the Russians and UN and Taiwan. They don't know all these complicated things that he's dealt with. Also trying to stop the guerrilla war that he did, which his brothers indulged in, but he didn't want and he didn't like, and the Indian government didn't like.
Yes.
And his wanting to stick to a Gandhian policy, which he has basically stuck to all along.
He has.
And so these older people who knew the basic story and knew him, they said it was great because of the pictures and the dialogue and reading it and happening like a drama. I got all the way through it, and now I have a real sense of His Holiness's views and his life. We also quote from His Holiness's March 10th speeches. He gave 50 March 10th speeches, which is the day that they celebrate as what's called the Lhasa Uprising.
Yes.
Although it might better be termed the Lhasa Mousetrap, set by Deng and Mao, if you know the true story of it.
Yes.
But anyway, that in 1959, since then, since 1961 to 2011, he gave 50 speeches. And these are more political and dealing with stuff, State of the Union kind of thing,
Tibet House published a book of those speeches.
We published a book, actually a translation from French, where they picked out it's not complete speeches, but it picks out key ones.
Wonderful
and
book.
Passages of one. It has a commentary by Sophia Struhl-Rever in French, and then we just had it translated and republished in English. And it's called My Appeal to the World by the Dalai Lama and Sophia. And it's a great book, actually. But again, the way publishing is now, with everybody wanting to sell to the Chinese market, and Chinese using their leverage to what we call in the movement the billion shoelace syndrome they use. You know, the Westerner who has a shoelace factory in New Hampshire, and he thinks he's going to sell a billion shoelaces to the Chinese.
Yeah.
And actually, what he does is they make him make a factory in China, and then they get the shoelace technology, and then they're selling a billion shoelaces to us.
Right.
And he goes out of business.
Right.
Which has been the history. But you know, they all get still enchanted by the Chinese market and so forth. And eventually, when trade is really free with China and they're not playing their mercantilist game, you know, of Chinese really warfare, economic warfare, which they have been doing effectively, then there will be a market and it will be good. But that'll be when they've loosened up, you know, liberalized, which they haven't yet.
Right.
But we're hoping they will soon, actually. And that will happen at the same time that they will loosen up the way they deal with what they call their minorities or their colonial possessions, you could say. And they make a kind of real federal union sort of thing, like eventually the Soviet Union was forced to do, you know.
Yes.
They were forced to make a bunch of republics, you know, which would be much more independent of each other if it wasn't for the KGB Putin reaction.
Yes.
Which prevented Russia from opening. And China has not gotten there yet, you know. But they will, we're confident.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you about that. You do seem very hopeful about the future of China and the good Tibetan people. What's your vision for the future? How do you see it in 50 years?
Well, it's His Holiness's vision. And although we're all very discouraged emotionally at the moment because it's been the crackdown has been so harsh and under Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao and the latter years of Deng. And there was a brief opening, you know, in the early 80s, but that was the only short period.
Yeah.
But that was conducted, among others, by Xi Jinping's father.
Ah.
He was one of the major players in doing an opening in regard to Tibet. So we're very hopeful about that. And you know, we have an idea about him and his family that he will actually do what a Chinese leader would be sensible to do, which is give people a break, you know, and be more self-confident. And but the future view is that it's, you know, it's not possible to conquer the world by anybody.
Yes.
Just like we've seen since the end of the Great World War, the last World War, that, you know, there's no real victory in any of the wars. Nobody wins.
No.
The defeated are just pushed down for a while, and then there's terrorism, and then there's unease, and there's huge military budgets, and then people are uncomfortable, and it's really bad, you know. The Middle East, that goes for Middle East, it goes for Afghanistan, it goes for everywhere where violence has been tried in a pre-21st century, you know, like style. Violence has been attempted to make a stable and peaceful situation by holding things down. And that just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a great book that I love a lot, which relates a lot to my vision, and I've shared it with His Holiness, an English book, so he wouldn't have read it, but by a man named Jonathan Schell, called The Unconquerable World, Power, Nonviolence, and the Will of the People. And that's not relating to Gandhi or Dalai Lama or Martin Luther King or any such thing. It's related to the Velvet Revolution in Eastern Europe, and the theorists, therefore, Václav Havel and Lech Walesa and other people like that, that, you know, war as defined by the Prussian theorist of war in the West, you know, von Clausewitz, is no longer viable because it depended in the past on you were defeating the enemy army in the field, so to speak.
Right.
And then you didn't even kill all the soldiers, they just surrendered at some point. And then they would go back, and occasionally, if it was in a civilian area, there'd be some looting and pillaging and raping and nasty things that soldiers get into when they get hopped up. But let's say the rule of thumb, 95% military casualty, 5-10% civilian casualty. And then the other country that you had the war with does something you wanted them to do that you couldn't get them to do without the war.
Correct.
That's the theory of war. But now we are at post-Powell doctrine, and actually it isn't really Powell doctrine only, it's weaponry, power of weaponry. Post-power of weaponry, you obliterate the enemy country.
Yeah.
95% of the casualties are civilian. And you have drones, like operators, like somewhere else,
Yeah.
And that's the extreme of it. But in general, there are some military casualties, but nothing compared to the civilian casualties. Like take the Iraq War, and therefore the country is not inclined to do what you want. In fact, they certainly won't. Like Cheney lied to everybody and to himself, of course, because he's Darth Cheney, and he lied, and he said that, well, whatever, don't worry about the expense, we'll just rack it up on our oil industry credit card, and we will use the oil in Iraq to pay for the war. Mm-hmm. Well, since that war, we've had no decent contracts in Iraq. The French, the Chinese, other people have gotten oil, and the Russians, people have gotten the Iraqi oil because they're mad at us. They're sick of us.
Yeah.
They don't like us.
That makes sense.
And also, of course, the stupidity. We handed Iraq to the Shiites, the Iranians, basically.
Right.
And that they're a big enemy of ours. So, I mean, it's just really dumb,
Yeah.
And but that's an example. And then Afghanistan, nobody's ever winning Afghanistan, ever.
No.
And the Middle East, sure, the Israelis have the West Bank, and they're acting like fascists, totally. And they have this huge wall, and when you have a wall, you're keeping somebody out, but you're also keeping somebody in. Mm-hmm. And it's not a viable long-term situation.
No.
At all.
No.
For like 4 or 5 million people, or 3 million, whatever it is in Israel, against like 1 billion Muslims who they're just cultivating their hatred.
That's right.
By pressing them so badly. So it doesn't. These things don't work, and they don't no longer work. And so the human beings are used to war being the final arbiter of everything. Finally our relationship is determined by who can beat who up. That's been the history of the last few thousand years, anyway, since it's been patriarchal societies. Mm-hmm. And it's not a good history, and we have to grow out of it now. So that's clear, and therefore those faction in China that wants to conquer everybody is really barking up the wrong tree. And the faction that wants to get along with everybody and be respected as one of the great people, bunches of people in the world, and overcome white people's sort of yellow peril, yellow racism that they definitely have. Not to mention overcome their own yellow racism against white people who they think of as like short-haired rabbits with weird blue eyes, and and they're on that sort of primal level, and so that's really, if you say that the major event of our era is the overcoming of all racisms.
Yes.
We're in America very focused on the white-black one, but and that is a big one, of course, with Africa and the whole thing. And it's a very important one, and not to be neglected or low changed at all. But there is a big white-yellow one,
oh, absolutely.
Huge, and yellow-white one, you could say. And now that they're no longer just going to be pressing and ironing our shirts and making like a MSG laced like chow mein, and they're going to have they're going to make their own cars, and they're going to sell us this and that. They're going to teach us different things too. That they have discovered in their history and so on. And we're going to deal with them as equals, and that's the way it's going to be.
It has to be.
And vice versa, of course.
It's a paradigm shift across all nations.
Exactly.
Because it seems like now is a time when that can happen, because you can't be so ethnocentric or nationalistic in the sense that we can be exposed to more things, more ideas, more people through the internet, which is really, that's a liberating factor of the internet.
Absolutely.
There's some negative things to the internet too.
It is. It can be, unfortunately, the internet can also be a very, very fascist dominating factor when it's highly, it can be another medium of propaganda, as we just saw in the last election, fake news and so on.
Yes, yeah.
So it has to be managed, in other words.
So we have our work cut out for us.
Yes, we do. But it's the time to do it. And coming back to Tibet, in the case of Tibet and why doing this book, it also followed, I didn't even realize that myself, because in a way I didn't initiate the graphic novel aspect of the project. It was brought to me about 10 years ago, and I immediately liked it, and I wanted to see it go, but I didn't really jump it both feet myself. I tried to help fund it from Tibet House and sort of, because it was part of Tibet House's mission to show what Tibet is,
Yes.
And but then I really got into it about 3 years ago and got grants, and I worked on it and wrote a lot myself, and corrected things, and did. But then someone said to me, me when I did one interview back east. They said, "Oh, well, it followed right for you, right out of why the Dalai Lama matters." Well, of course, you naturally moved to doing a biography, and a graphic one reaches the millennials and the new and the post-millennials. You know, there's a new generation now we have to cope with. So someone there's a great study out of some social scientist recently that I read in the Atlantic magazine about they call them the I-gen. It's not the X-gen or the Y, it's the I-gen, meaning, you know, they're all stuck on their iPhones. And actually the study is that the more time they spend on their Facebook with their friends or whatever it is, their Snapchat or whatever, the more depressed they become and the more isolated, actually.
That makes sense.
And there are these high school kids in the Midwest who never get out of their bedroom. They don't even go petting in the parking lot.
Wow.
They're just chatting on the phone all the time with everybody.
I heard something like
and really
5,000 messages a month.
Oh, I mean, really huge. Yeah, it's huge. There's a big study, you know, a very, very, empirical study about it. It's not just an opinion. But anyway, that's the I-gen.
The I-gen. I haven't
And
heard
for the
that.
I-gen, we have the book you can have it on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Or your Android, and you can click on a particular panel on a comic book page, you know, and then that becomes the whole phone, you know. So it's a decent enough size to be able to read the bubbles, you know, the dialogue bubbles, and then there's some passages that are just print, and then you can click on that, and that'll just give you the print big enough to read. So it's kind of fun. You can navigate through it.
Yeah, that's
on a
great.
phone, you know.
That's great. Or maybe their parents will buy them a copy because it's so beautiful. The book is really beautiful.
It is lovely.
You're listening to the Sacred Stream radio podcast with guest Robert Thurman. Well, Bob, you have a few things coming up, some events that I just wanted to cover. And one is back at Minla. Well, you have a lot happening at Minla, but I'm thinking of Shamans and Siddhas coming up in October.
Yes, Isa, Sacred Stream Isa is coming to Minla, and what's the date? Actually, I forgot.
It's the 4th through the 9th
of October.
Okay.
4th through 9th of October. But people can come just for the weekend if they can't make the full length of it. And
it's Columbus Day weekend.
Yeah, and that'll be a lot of fun. I always learn a lot from Isa on those, and I enjoy it a lot. And it's great connecting in a way. That's another place where Tibet is a huge bridge, you know.
Yes.
Because the Tibetans connecting to sort of the indigenous traditions and the folk things and the local spirits of the land. One thing, when Buddhism spread in Asia, it did not do a thing that unfortunately Christianity has tended to do, which is like cut down the holy tree of Thor in Denmark, you know, for example, so to suppress the earlier sort of natural things, you know, and then dealing with the natural world in some idea that, you know, there's this absolute God that made a different world elsewhere, and we don't need the regular one. And Buddhism didn't do that, but they would sort of deal with the deities, and they would relativize any notion of an absolute deity, and they would deal with them like those spirits and deities like they were citizens, you know, of the world, and respect them in a way. But the one thing, they never would make any blood sacrifice. That they would, in that sense, they would relativize. They don't like trying to make the taking of life holy, even though Tibetans, some of the Southeast Asian Buddhist countries they killed fish, you know, the Tibetans killed yaks, you know, they ate meat because they were nomads, you know.
Yes.
But so they weren't perfect holy, and super vegans.
Yeah.
But they were very regretful taking life of any animal, and they didn't make it holy, you know. And Buddhism does not think that animals don't have souls, and Buddhism does not think that animals will not be humans and have not been humans, since all beings' lives are beginningless. We've all had infinite, you know, animated experience in all realms, including heavens and hells and animal forms and so on.
And Minla is a beautiful place, and it's you and your wife Nena started that, and it's a home for His Holiness when he comes to the U.S. sometimes. And it's in upstate New York for people that haven't been, there's a spa, and there are lots of retreats. You teach lots of classes there, but also other really remarkable teachers are there. So, anything else that you want to say about Menla?
Well, it's a magical place, actually. It was made in the Catskill website. Just the Catskill Forest website. It's the middle of the national forest called the Catskill Game Preserve, and there's no immediate neighbors. It's not a neighborhood. It's in the forest. We have bears and deers and things, and black bears. They're harmless, and they're friendly actually. But especially they're friendly to the garbage dump. We have to put an electric fence around it, and they are very cute. And it was made by a meteorite strike, and it was one of the earliest noted ones 200 million years ago. A big meteorite, a huge one, and it was underwater at the time, that area, and it smashed in and made these huge things. So about a mile and a half underground is a giant deposit of meteoric iron, which creates a magnetic thing and also a gravitational sort of bump, where when you walk on the property there, you're 2 ounces lighter, or so. There's some 0.00% lighter.
Yes.
And there's this special energy there, therefore, that everyone finds. For decades before Tibet House was given this property by a very kind, generous donor, a white Tara emanation, there was a spiritual center there called the Center for the Living Force, where a woman medium called Eva Parakos dictated many teachings from a being called the Guide, and who was, Atlantis or something. I mean, nobody really knows exactly. And actually, Isa has contacted that. She's the first person, and since we've been there, who's recontacted that guide a little bit. And we've had a few words of encouragement on that, and how the guide's teachings, although he speaks theistically, because the audience he was speaking in the 50s and 60s were, of course, theists, monotheists mostly, talks about God a lot, capital G-O-D. But he says that he is teaching about dealing with your unconscious and looking at your mind, not suppressing your deeper energies, but not also venting your angers and things, but seeing your dark side and so on. Very big teaching like that. He has said through our new shaman Isa that it's very much in the vein of Buddhism, and they're very thrilled that it's the Dalai Lama's place now, and that the Buddhist teaching is the stream there, is the central stream. But we have Hindus coming, and yogis, and have Kabbalistic Jewish people, and Christians, and regular Jews and Christians, and Muslim people. Not so many Muslim Sufis, and we've had Taoists and things, but we're open to them, and we hope to have more of all the different world traditions and so forth, and the indigenous traditions. We've had the grandmothers there, and we've had Seneca Indians and all kinds of and Lakotas and African indigenous people, Asian indigenous people. The ones from Colombia who live in the dark, they're holy people, grow up in the dark. They're called, I forgot what they're called, but something. They live in the Sierra there by the sea in Colombia. And so it's a magical place, and when people come there, even the land is a teaching for them. And of course, Menla itself means medicine Buddha, and it relates to the Buddha's vision that nature is there to heal beings, and plants like us. He's a form of Buddha that Buddha manifests himself as, where he holds a plant. It's called the myrobalan plant, which is in Indian medicine, in Ayurvedic and Buddhist medicine. It's a panacea, like a universal healing plant. The nut that it produces, ground into fine powder.
Yes.
And so he holds that. So that's our sort of fantasy about Menla, that it's the place itself heals you. The leaves of the trees, the blades of grass, the flowers. That's our sort of dream about it, And people kind of feel that, and they get into that dream.
I think so. It's a very dynamic. You have lots going on. Oh, I've got a mic. You have a lot going on, and the place, you can't be in a better, more beautiful, relaxing, and healing place to receive teaching. So hopefully everyone will get there at least once in their lives.
That's great. They will. And then, the other thing is that the reason we were given the place is that when His Holiness asked me to take responsibility for preserving Tibetan culture and found a cultural center in America for him, originally in 1979 and then again he reiterated in 86 and sent Richard Gere to work together, where we were then got a little bit moving.
Right.
And then when Gere went over to the political side of the Tibet movement, he told me to continue, and I was very nervous about it. I thought I couldn't manage without someone like Richard helping me.
Yes.
And then he said, well, you will. And then I didn't know it. I mean, yeah, great, I will. But then I had a dream. And in the dream I saw Tibetan medicine, the tradition of medicine, as where the Tibetan culture will become really treasured by everyone, by all non-Tibetans, when they realize the greatness of that tradition and how it integrates the sort of naturopathic, natural things. It's not averse to high-tech type of things. It likes them if used judiciously and non-commercially.
Yes.
You know, and also it has its own unique mental things, you know, of meditation and the general Buddhist profound psychological sciences and so on, and meditational and psychological sciences, and that when that was known and treasured by people around the world, the medicine Buddha tradition, the Menla tradition, that then the Tibetans would realize they could have a good livelihood and on their practical side by learning their own culture and learning their own medical, because you know, a culture's values and things and knowledge is expressed in its medicine tradition, because human beings have to constantly, you know, avert, you know, illness and obesity and diabetes, you know, whatever, mismanaging of their bodies and their environment, you know. They always have to handle that. So medicine is always key. And so that's where, you know, so the Menla is, in our sense, a kind of seed of what the whole of Tibet will be under Dalai Lama's vision, which we show at the end of our book, where the whole of Tibet will be a medicine land. And it will be we have visions of the Tibet as the Switzerland of Asia. You know, His Holiness thinks of Switzerland, and we don't normally think of Switzerland as a banking center.
That's true.
The gnomes of Zurich. But actually there are many sanatoria in Switzerland, and it has a beautiful environment. And of course there are many medical companies there.
Right.
Right. And so it is a kind of medicine culture, you know, Swiss in its own way, you know. All that phytopharmaceutical thing you find in Europe.
Yes.
The Swiss are very big in that. Yeah. And so why shouldn't Asia have a high mountain center place, headwater of rivers, you know, that is also a place where people can go up from crowded and polluted cities and go nearby themselves. They can go up over the passes in airplanes nowadays, and they can have a healing vacation or healing session there, a month or two or something like that. And that's his vision, and we show that, you know. And for China, it will be the jewel in China's crown, that they will make this place open to the world and let the Tibetans manage it with their own cultural wisdom, and keep it beautiful, restore it into its beauty. You know, they over timbered it, they desertified, the Chinese did. They desertified many parts of the steppe.
Yes.
And they've overused the water and dried up their own headwaters and things. Yes. You know, and I'm thinking, you know, sacred stream, you know, I love Isa and your sacred stream, you know, and Tibet is where all the sacred streams of Asia come from, and the melting of those glaciers in the summers is exactly where, in the non-monsoon periods, the rivers get the water that keeps people, 3 billion or 2.5 billion people alive. All the way in an arc from Yangtze River all the way around to the Indus River in Pakistan. You know, those parts of the Indus Valley, that is Pakistan. And so, you know, the Mekong comes from Tibet, the Yangtze complex comes from Tibet, the Brahmaputra in eastern India, the Ganges, etc. So it's really, to ruin Tibet is like Standing Rock in that sense, but a mega Standing Rock to ruin Tibet, you know. And of course, that's another racism that we have to deal with, is the white-red one. You know, that's one America hasn't even begun to face properly, you know.
It's true.
And we need the red people. And luckily, they were not all exterminated, and they're still there, and we need them to help us reconnect to Earth, because we've been too alienated because of the violent way in which we obtained our footing in this continent, Turtle Island. You know. So that's really important. And in South America, the same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot.
So that's red, white, yellow, and black.
Yeah.
And those are the colors of the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time, teaching that the Dalai Lama has so widely spread in the world,
Yes.
And it's very unusual and sort of a mystical, amazing thing, actually. I call it the time machine. Because wheel is like, in Sanskrit, you can use wheel to mean your chariot, like your car,
Yes.
Same as we say, how's your wheels? I have new wheels, referring to a car. Anyway, so that's the thing.
It's fantastic. Yeah, one other thing, you're back for the SAND conference in October, and you'll be presenting there. And,
yes.
and anything else you want to mention? What's next for you? What's your next creative project?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'll maybe finally finish a few more books.
Good.
Before I croak, and then I'll do some more tours if I can still talk.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much,
Okay,
Bob.
sure.
It's always
All the best.
wonderful.
There you go. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Stream Radio podcast with our special guest, Robert Thurman. Bob's latest book, Man of Peace, The Illustrated Life Story of the Dalai Lama of Tibet, is currently available in stores and on Amazon. If you'd like to learn more about Bob, you can visit his website, bobthurman.com. If you'd like to take a class with Bob, he regularly teaches at Tibet House in New York City and at Minla Mountain Retreat. Our featured artist today is Dan Walters, and we're playing selections from his latest record, Nye. If you'd like to learn more about Dan, he's featured in the Sacred Stream store at sacredstream.org. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation of the Sacred Stream, Red Cow Productions, and CDR Plus.